Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. We bring you the news and views of the week that was, what was important, what made news, and what you should care about. I'm Roshan Karyappa and I have with me Nirav Kanodra and Abhishek Paul here to run you through all that happened last week, and it was quite an eventful week, I should say. There was this BBC documentary on Prime Minister Modi that was released. Of course, the Davos summit is happening. Then we have updates from the Hockey World Cup. And in other sports news, unfortunately, there have been some protests and some controversy in the Wrestling Federation of India. And the tech layoffs continue, and there were some rather controversial comments by the former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan. All of this and more in this edition of the weekly. If you're joining us for the first time, do follow us for more content on policy, politics, and culture. We bring you a couple of episodes or more every week. If you're a returning visitor, don't forget to rate and review us so more people can discover us and follow our content. All right, with that out of the way, Nirav, Abhishek, what do you guys think about the episode we put out last week with Ashish Chandorkar and Suraj Sudhir on their new book, Braving a Viral Storm? Abhishek?
Yeah, so I've been reading the book as well along the last week. So, yeah, as usual, great episode and great to hear from both the authors of the book, right? This is obviously a very interesting story they have told about how India vaccinated about 2 billion plus doses, right, in just about a couple of years. And there were so many twists and turns along the way, right? Whether it is challenges with regard to getting the domestic vaccines approved or pressure from foreign vaccine manufacturers. In between, we had big second wave and so on. So, yeah, always interesting to get a in-depth look at what goes on behind the headlines, so to speak. So, yeah, it was a great episode.
I think I echo Abhishek's thoughts. Yeah, basically the whole journey, and this is kind of saying like about India's state capacity and India's ability to be resilient. Like you had a big shock of COVID, you had the second wave, which was very brutal. In between the whole thing, in between so there's one thing about like the vaccines and not bowing to like external pressure, and one thing to be able to manufacture domestically, even if technology for AstraZeneca was from abroad. And second thing was delivery, distribution, all of that, right? So I think all these things are incremental steps in our improving state capacity, and hopefully this example of this better state capacity helps us in executing any sort of projects or anything more down the line.
Yeah, it was such a wonderful conversation, really, because I think the last 2 or 3 years have been a blur. We've gone through so much, and reliving some of those moments really brought back all of the challenges, right? And for me, I mean, a few things that stood out was our strategy in terms of procurement. We ended up spending about 45,000 crores in total, at least up until July of last year, for all of the vaccines, right? And we did 2 point something billion vaccine doses. Which was remarkable considering the amount of money that some of the more developed countries spent. Then all of the logistics and everything, right? I mean, how various mechanisms came together, the state in different parts of the country, right? And finally, I mean, the effort of perhaps the common people, the scientists, the businessmen who took on those risks, and many of whom we lost as well, right? So really terrible, but really left me with a sense of gratitude and a sense of pride for the fact that I'm an Indian, right? And irrespective of what side of the political aisle you belong, I think it's just only fair to recognize the tremendous leadership of Prime Minister Modi under these circumstances, right? So yeah, if you haven't listened to that podcast, then definitely do follow it.
And
Well,
Mansukh Mandavia.
of course, the health minister as well, who's incidentally written the foreword of the book, right? So yeah, definitely check out that podcast. Very, very interesting conversation with Ashish and Sudhir. All right, moving on. On Tuesday, the BBC aired a documentary, India the Modi Question, which it claims is an investigative piece on the role of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the 2002 Gujarat riots. The documentary pushes the narrative that Mr. Modi enabled the riots to become the Prime Minister in 2014. India's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Arindam Bagchi, strongly criticized the film. He termed this as a propaganda piece based on discredited evidence and said that it represents a colonial mindset. Nirav, the timing seems odd. I mean, it was recorded a while
Yeah, yeah.
back. What do you make of it?
Okay, so obviously, I think all of these events happened after 26th of Jan 2002, right? 21 years later, what's the sudden interest to play out any event which happened so far ago, so long ago? And it's not as if the people who have, like, they've not been in the public eye or whatever, right? So that is one thing. So obviously this is something which has probably some sort of an agenda, looking at, like, say, 2024 elections, etc. So I think that is one. It's not as if this event happened and it took them 21 years to make this documentary. Two is, uh, they claim that the riots, so basically, they what was basically set of, like, riots which started when some people burnt a train and 60 people were killed. They claim at the start that a fire on a train, they don't say that who caused the fire, led to riots, right? And so when you start off with, like, kind of half truth, if not a lie, I think that kind of discredits rest of the story altogether as well, right? So this is what I felt personally. Second thing is, this matter has been played on in India. You've got Supreme Court kind of ruling over it in 2013. You had a UPA government in the center from 2004 to 14, and they tried their best, uh, if not anything, for, like, political gains in Gujarat. And the people of Gujarat have repeatedly voted the BJP government in power. Modi has won two elections, right? So I think people are not stupid. Second thing is, you think about it this way, like, people in India don't need to be told by UK or by BBC what's happening in India, right? That was already being covered. Everybody knows about whatever has happened in 2002 itself, right? So now, second thing is, this is where probably India lacks, or Indian media lacks. We don't have, like, sadly, Doordarshan is very badly managed, or it's not as good quality of production, like how, say, for example, an Al Jazeera or like a Russia Today, etc., right? Or like a BBC. They're commenting on a third country and, like, selling it to others, right? So the audience may not be like India, but they're trying to discredit India at the time when Indian economy has come out quite well from COVID. A lot of people are saying invest in India, one of the countries, as like a China plus one strategy. India is trying to attract a lot of investment via PLI schemes, right? All of these things. So when you're seeing this kind of going positive in India's direction, you deliberately throw, like, a spanner in the works and try and use your influence on, like, global media to try and turn attention wrong somewhere. So either they have, like, a political agenda, BBC, either they are trying to move away, like, the public perception. So your target audience is probably like a Western CEO who's thinking, should I move my supply chains out of China to India or Vietnam or Indonesia or wherever? So do you want to, like, kind of remove India from that reckoning, etc., etc., right? So those things have to be questioned, but I don't have the answers. And then finally, I want to say this: in the British Parliament, a Labour MP, Imran Hussain, kind of made his accusation to Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, that did the Foreign Office know about this in act of ethnic cleansing? So if there has been no ethnic cleansing, it's not ethnic cleansing has happened in India, and that was in Kashmir, right? Uh, in Gujarat, there are Muslims who still live there. There has been no other sort of riots, or there's no violence against any minorities in a coordinated manner, right? So that has not really happened. Indian Muslim population hasn't fallen, right? So there's no such thing. Anyways, Rishi Sunak replied saying that Britain would not support persecution anywhere, and they do not agree with this characterization of Prime Minister Modi, right? So I think that was like a very straightforward, clear-cut answer, which Rishi Sunak gave in the British Parliament, and closed the chapter then and there itself. But basically, what I feel is, this is not a matter to be discussed in British Parliament. In Indian Parliament, we don't discuss the act on Jan 6th in the US Capitol, right? Storming of the US Capitol. That's not for us. That's not for India to discuss. That's US's internal matter, right? So similarly, I think unless there was any involvement of UK or UK nationals, etc., that is none of UK's business. At least not the UK Parliament's business. BBC is a global media company. They can choose to cover whatever they want to cover. They have their own biases. People need to filter that. But what I feel is, once you start giving out some biased reports on certain things, right? And that makes you question anything else that they cover as well. So I feel like a lot of legacy media houses, they kind of take their privileged position for granted. But now that's what they're losing out to alternative media just because of these kind of things. So that's all what I have to say. And I think for an ordinary Indian, this shouldn't really matter, right? Nobody's going to change their opinion based on this documentary. If you had like a strong opinion earlier, you probably continue holding on to that opinion, whichever side of the spectrum you are.
Yeah. No, I quite agree. But one point of difference is, look, the BBC is funded by the British taxpayers, right? So obviously they have a responsibility towards the government. So something like this, I would kind of think of it as a like a diplomatic aggression, or if not aggression, at least an indiscretion, right? So I don't think it should be treated as just a stray media outlet doing some investigative or supposed
No, agreed. As
investigative
in,
reporting.
if India can choose to stop like BBC telecast or like block BBC website from India, I think India has like a huge number of internet users. A lot of the advertising revenue, at least on their websites, etc., is a good chunk of it is also derived from India. So if Indian government chooses to do that, that's perfectly fine. I think, but that would like kind of, in my opinion, maybe make India look petty or Indian government look petty. The opposite of love is not hate. It's like ignorance. So just kind of ignore it and then move on. Lastly, I forgot this point. Jack Straw, who's been interviewed in all of this BBC documentary, right? Only time I remember him previously was when he had a documentary about like Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. They weren't found either. So like here, when your person with this kind of credibility comes in, I don't know how do you kind of like give any weightage to whatever else that they say.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I mean, I think Lord Rami Ranger, a member of the House of Lords, also tweeted saying that BBC News, you've caused a great deal of hurt to over a billion Indians. It insults a democratically elected Prime Minister, the Indian police and Indian judiciary. We condemn the riots and loss of life and also condemned your biased reporting. Well, moving on, fears of recession continue to rock the tech world as giants lay off thousands of people. Google joined a host of other tech companies, scaling back their workforce significantly. In the latest wave from this month alone, Amazon, Microsoft, Salesforce, and Google's layoffs will result in nearly 50,000 job losses across the world. The last wave was in November of 2022 with Meta and Twitter cutting thousands from their workforce. Abhishek, do you think this will continue?
Yeah, I sadly think so. I mean, I do know of other companies who are going to follow suit in the next couple of weeks, I suppose. So, yeah, I mean, things are not great right now in the external world out there, right? So, for example, just uh, in 2022, the top 10 biggest tech stocks in the US lost a market cap of $4.6 trillion, right? Like ultimately, tech CEOs are judged by their performance in the markets, right? And when you have a market capital erosion of 4.6 trillion in a year, uh, they are bound to take actions, right, to protect shareholder interests. And as you said, we there have been losses of about 50,000 or 70,000 as per some reports, right? So I was just going through Sundar Pichai's memo that he sent, I think, last night, right? And he's talked about all these external challenges that companies like Google are facing. And, we were discussing, I think, a week or couple of weeks back about the global economic situation, and it all sort of stems from that, right? There is global inflation that is causing interest rates to rise. Interest rates rising means stocks are becoming less, you know, attractive and so on, right? So it's like a vicious cycle, and tech stocks are sort of caught up in this. It is not necessarily that their operational performances have gone down that much, right? It is more of a perception issue that they have to face given the stock market challenges. There's also obviously another sort of paradigm to it, and that is the whole efficiency question, right? Which, for example, Elon Musk is working on right now to prove, right? He's sort of let go 80% of employees at Twitter by now. The site is still running all right, right? And so that is the other sort of dimension to this whole debate of whether technology companies are or have become overstaffed and carrying a lot of flab in the last decade, right? And so tech CEOs also have to answer on that question, right? And demonstrate that their companies are run efficiently. And so I think with the overall sort of dire macro situation, I mean, there's also one more angle to it, I think, which Satya Nadella mentioned in his remarks, right, at Davos, which is that, the pandemic saw an acceleration of spending in the digital areas, right? But that spending is also sort of getting rationalized now, right, by firms. And we are also seeing a sort of decline in digital ad spends, right, by various firms. And so that is also sort of playing into it. And so yeah, I think 2023 is probably going to see a lot of challenges for tech firms as they sort of try to navigate this very let's say difficult macroeconomic situation.
Yeah, I think if you look at the last 3 or 4 years, whether it's Amazon, Google, Meta, and the likes, right? They've all been increasing headcount by 20, 30%, perhaps even more, in fact, on a yearly basis, right? Now, if you do that, you're bound to double in size in about 2 to 4 years. And this is notwithstanding Amazon's two pizza rule, right? That every team must be just big enough that two pizzas can, adequately satiate the team. So in the normal course of things, you hope that the churn on a yearly basis will sort of right size the company. But what's happened over the last 3 4 years is I don't think that has happened either, right? For whatever reasons, call it a little more leniency, a little more laxness in the whole quality or hiring practices, retention practices, etc. And this whole rest and west culture has become really prevalent in big tech, right? I mean, I hear very anecdotally from people who are there in it for the perks, which could be like office lunches and daycare and so on and so forth, right? Pretty much that. And if you're going to be hiring at such a furious pace, you're going to be adding a lot of people who are maybe a year in the company, right? And that, I think, induces a tremendous amount of pressure in terms of training these folks, getting them into the groove of things, even if these folks are mid to senior level folks, right? I mean, people normally take about 3 months at least to ramp, right, irrespective of how efficient your onboarding process is and so on. So I think, given all of these things, the macro situation is a perfect foil, right? I mean, look at the amount of market cap these folks have lost, right? 70, 80% over the last year or so. So I think the slowdown and the macro situation has forced their hand finally, right, and has gotten big tech to sort of cut the flab, as you mentioned, Abhishek.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing which Sundar Pichai mentioned is that they had been hiring for a different economic reality. So the economic reality has sort of caught up with firms, right? Which were looking at, let's say, past trend of incredible growth to continue, which obviously we know that economics it's all a very cyclical thing, right? You can have 3 4 great years, but then there will obviously be a correction that will follow as well, right? And so basically you could say that the economic realities have caught up with the kind of projections that people had been making.
Yeah. Yeah, what goes up must come down, and vice versa. Moving on, over the past week, the World Economic Forum held its 53rd annual summit at Davos. Several topics were discussed, ranging from a call for unity and collaboration, trade for resilience, growth, and climate action, the global economic outlook, and tackling the climate crisis. Nirav, what were the highlights of the summit, and could you also talk about the Indian perspective?
Yeah, so see, Davos, the World Economic Forum, now it's getting a lot of bad rep. See, this is like about maybe like about a few years ago, that was like the peak globalization moment. And you had all the global elites meeting at like one town in Switzerland, a ski resort, right? And discussing about the world's problems. I think one very big signal. So President Joe Biden chose not to attend, right? Like previously, Trump and like previous prime ministers, Obama, etc., were always going there. But this time, Biden chose not to attend because it kind of signifies that elitist kind of a view, right? And like a few people talking big things, nothing really changes. So that has been the criticism. The part about like the way it can be leveraged at Davos is you have a lot of these global elites coming in. So from Indian perspective, so India had like Invest in India forum over there. Maharashtra state has signed MOUs with a lot of companies spanning electric vehicles, steel, infrastructure, etc. You had like the Maharashtra CM Eknath Shinde going there, right? India has been seen in a much better positive light right now by most people, apart from, we'll speak later, Raghuram Rajan, who kind of criticized India's growth, saying 7% is not enough for India. But compared to like other countries, probably India has done reasonably well. There's a little bit of like focus on India as being like one of the growth engines, right? India has kind of benefited from the chaos, right? So that is one thing. And like in terms of like other things, right? Like they're talking about the there's been a now in the last couple of years there's been a little bit of pushback or like criticism of people at Davos, that people are jet setting and going in private jets to Switzerland, staying in like centrally heated hotels, and having a huge energy footprint, and telling rest of the world to consume less, right? They're saying, telling the rest of the world that eat less because climate change, or eat less meat, for example, etc., etc. Use less fertilizer. So that has been a little bit of a pushback this time, right? And this is like a 5 day event. So while a lot of it's like a nice networking and a nice event for all the movers and shakers, if you can leverage it, right? So India has tried to keep an Invest in India forum over there. So at the same time, try to get something. Maharashtra CM and that, though like the MOUs that have been signed, I've been told are non-binding, right? But at least an expression of interest. It's one place where you can try and get things done or get the ball rolling. But to be fair, to have very high expectations of them actually implementing anything is also difficult. And so yeah, I think this is the first time the US president hasn't gone there, right? So it's kind of reducing the importance of this forum as well. So yeah, that's also something to take note of.
Yeah, but I thought the most interesting comment was the World Economic Forum chairman's, right? He said India is a bright spot amid the global crisis, and Prime Minister Modi's leadership is critical in a fractured world. I think that really means something, right? All right, moving on. And in some unfortunate news, prominent Indian wrestlers such as Vinesh Phogat, Sakshi Malik, Sumit Malik, and Bajrang Purnia have been protesting at New Delhi's Jantar Mantar for the third consecutive day on Friday. Vinesh Phogat alleged that the Wrestling Federation of India, WFI chief Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, has been sexually exploiting women wrestlers for years. The wrestlers have also alleged that several coaches at the national camp in Lucknow have exploited women wrestlers. Union Sports Minister Anurag Thakur met the wrestlers on Thursday night and said that the allegations are serious and the government has already taken steps. Abhishek, this is pretty unfortunate, right? And wrestling is, a domain where India has done really well at the international level.
Yeah, it's been a very unfortunate sort of series of events. But of course, the allegations are about events that have happened quite a bit earlier. So, just to recap, I would say almost all of India's leading wrestlers started a protest earlier this week at Jantar Mantar with major allegations against the Wrestling India Federation chief Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. The allegations included allegations of sexual harassment. There were allegations of misuse of funds, sponsorship funds that are not flowing down to the wrestlers. There were allegations of mismanagement of the team, holding camps, etc., at the convenience of the WIF chief rather than the wrestlers, and so on. And so basically, the picture that we got was that the Wrestling India Federation is basically in a very terrible state of affairs going on right now, right? And so this person who is the head of WIF is a 7-time MP, 6 times from the BJP, 1 time from the Samajwadi Party, and he is looked at as a very sort of big strongman in the Gonda area of Uttar Pradesh. He basically tried to sort of dismiss all allegations because his point of view was that Vinesh Fogart, who is like a former world championship medal winner, she was making allegations on behalf of other wrestlers. So his point was, where are the wrestlers who were actually alleged to have, he's supposed to have alleged to have harassed and so on? They are not coming out. And so he was trying to brazen it out. So the government, after sort of waiting a while, got into it. I think they sent the wrestler Babita Fogart. She's a BJP member. She went first to sort of start negotiations on behalf of the government, and later, I think the wrestlers met various authorities, including Anurag Thakur, who is the sports minister. I think there were 1 or 2 rounds of meeting in which the wrestlers were not satisfied with the assurances that things would be looked at. But I think last night, basically, what happened is the Brij Bhushan Saran Singh was asked to step aside for a month so that an independent investigation and inquiry can be taken up by the committee. So, based on that, the wrestlers have then decided to call off their protest because the WIF chief is sort of stepping down, and now we'll have to wait and see how the inquiry goes. So yeah, it's pretty unfortunate given all of India's top wrestlers of present and the recent past, right? They were all in unison protesting against these things.
Yeah, I think it's also part of a larger malaise with sports governance in India, right? I mean, it's corrupt at every level, really. And I think that's also because there is very low accountability, in this particular domain, right? I mean, it's seen as very discretionary. I hope there's more professionalism because India definitely has the talent, right? I mean, we've seen our athletes and sports people perform on the global stage. And as Nirav says, we should go from a sports watching country to a sports playing or participating country.
So these like associations are still run in, I would say, century old fashion, right? Of handouts and favors, and run in a proper feudal way. Like this guy probably thinks of himself as a god in the wrestling arena, right? He sort of, there are video footages you can see of, he will go into a wrestling tournament and he will start telling the referees what to do. He will make sure random people win and lose. He will slap random wrestlers who he thinks are not performing well. And so that is the kind of sort of culture we are still stuck in. Like the professionalism that you see in cricket is like a long way away from how many of the Olympic sports associations are run. I mean, we recently were suspended by FIFA, right, because of all the shenanigans happening on the football association. So, I mean, you can also sort of see like the wrestling is like a more of a rural dominated sport, right? And so while all the things that are probably, we are sort of stuck in a time warp, I would just say, right, where people are behaving in ways which are not appropriate in today's day and age.
Well, referring to the recently released annual report by the World Bank, wherein experts predicted a global recession in 2023, former RBI governor and Mr. Rahul Gandhi's recent friend, Raghuram Rajan, said that the argument that India will replace China is very premature as India is a much smaller economy as of now. He said this at a press briefing of the World Economic Forum. He also added the situation may change in the future as India is already the fifth largest economy in the world and it can keep growing. He further added that strong core inflation continues to remain a big concern for RBI. Neerav, these comments are coming in at a time when inflation clocked in, I think, at 5.72%. It's going to be around 5% by March, right? And various sources have said that, hey, India seems to be a bright spot, as I mentioned earlier, right? What do you make of this?
Yeah, so basically, I'll tell you what. If you wear red color glasses, everything seems red. If you wear blue colored glasses, everything seems to be blue. So Raghuram Rajan, I think, let me go through like a few comments which he made, right? So first comment he says that, India is growing at 7%, but that's not good enough because India needs to grow more because we contracted during the pandemic. So did the rest of the world, right? So you can choose to look at one good thing or like deliberately look at it in a wrong way. Inflation is a problem for India. So is it for the rest of the world. In India, inflation peaked at 7.5. Now it's come down to below 6. Core inflation is still sticky, but that is also in the rest of the world. In the US, inflation was at 9. In UK, it's 10.5. Europe, it's 10%. And then it has come down to like 7, right? India has also done like a reasonably better job, right? Everything could have been better if if you had hindsight is 2020. Then he says, what's the point of India manufacturing assembling iPhones if all the parts come from overseas? At least it creates some amount of jobs which are not there previously, right? And think about China in the year 2000. Maybe we are 20 years behind China. China in the year 2000 was just assembling electronic components. Other components are being imported from Korea, Taiwan, Southeast Asia, etc. But then the ecosystem can only develop once you start something, right? So you're taking a step in the right direction. You can always poo poo. India cannot replace China, but nobody's saying India will replace China. I agree totally. China is 5x the size of Indian economy. Chinese manufacturing is 10x the size of Indian economy. But can India try and win 10% of China's manufacturing, which doubles India's manufacturing output? That is the step one aim, right? And when that happens, more jobs are created. They consume domestic services. They consume other manufactured things which are manufactured locally, right? India gets more leverage in the international arena when more supply chains route through India, right? Then Indian security becomes very important. Skirmishes with China, skirmishes with Pakistan. If a lot of US CEOs have capital investments in India, then they will be worried about their investments. So, all these kind of things can play out. So, see, I feel obviously Raghuram Rajan has a biased view, which is colored by his political lens. Then finally coming to this, when he was asked by Rahul Kanwal about the old pension scheme being implemented in Himachal Pradesh. So he's giving a justification that entitlement spendings are there everywhere, and BJP government gave free food and free this, and so the question is, yes, in a poor country, I agree that there have to be entitlement payments, but who is it going to? The government employees on an average are paid better than the private sector employees. Two, by in the new pension scheme, the contribution for pension is done today, and whatever is contributed from the government side and from the employees pension contribution as invested, and then it is paid off at the end. In the old pension scheme, so this is defined contribution pension. A defined benefit pension is you get your defined after retirement, you get 70% of your last drawn salary till you live, and then if you pass away, then your spouse gets half of that, and that is moving along inflation. In cash accrual accounting, you only account for what are the pension payments being made today, and everything else you've left it to the future. So what happens is suddenly you government feels, oh, I have surplus money right now. So that is a bad thing, and you leave a problem for some time in the future, 20, 30 years down the line. And who is benefiting? The government employees are benefiting. It is a small section of society. I feel if you think that the government employees are being paid less, then their pay scale should be revised, etc. But not by this funny accounting. And a person who probably works 30 or 35 years in a government job, if they live up to 80 or 90, they're drawing salary almost for another 30 years, right? So all of these kind of things are maybe lead to fiscal ruin. Or as an economist, you should be able to say that this is not the right thing, irrespective which political party does it. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, on the other hand, he is a Congress member. He's been a Congress minister, held various ministries, right? He has criticized this. Despite being a actual Congress member, Raghuram Rajan says, oh, he's like not going to join any political party. He just went on Bharat Jodo Yatra because he agrees with those ideas with Rahul Gandhi. And then lastly, he says that characterization of Rahul Gandhi as Pappu is very unfortunate. He's like a smart young man. I have to disagree with that. Maybe smart, I don't know, but definitely he's not young. He's like 50. I think he's 52 or 53 now. He turns 53 this year. So he's in the latter half of middle age, right? So at least that part I would disagree with. I don't know about the first part of the comment, right? I'm not qualified to make that. So I think this is very clearly Raghuram Rajan. What he was is he's a professor of economics at University of Chicago. He's been previously the research head at IMF, right? And he's been a previous RBI governor. So instead of any of these hats, he's right now wearing a political hack hat. And I think, hence, all comments coming from him should be seen in that light. I think everything else, you can objectively list 20 things about India. I'm sure that 7, 8 things are not good. They're not good enough. Probably 12 things are good. Now you can choose to focus on what you want to. Second thing, you look at rest of the world right now. Right now, rest of the world, out of 20 things, maybe 15 things are bad, 5 things are good, right? So India is kind of relatively outperforming. Can it be better? Definitely. I am unhappy with 7% growth as well. I want it to be 8, 9%. China was growing at 10 to 12% in the 2000s. Uh, Probably can that be achieved? Maybe, maybe not. Not with the kind of electoral politics that we have. So I don't think it's a realistic expectation, right? So maybe we need to spend more on entitlement program. Maybe we need to. So we need to be more redistributive rather than focus on growth to be politically relevant enough any party to come again. So that can't be possible. But can we do better? Definitely, yes, we can do better. We have a lot more to catch up. We are a poor country, no doubt about it. We are a lower middle income country. We have a long way to go. But now think on the path and the slope that we are going at, right? And look at that and be happy with it. You can always criticize, oh, this is not done, that is not done. Tomorrow I can criticize TSMC that, oh, it makes the best semiconductors, but it has to import ASML machines from Netherlands. What? How bad is it, right? Apple, such a great company, oh, but its phones are manufactured in China, not in the US. Oh, it uses Taiwanese or Korean semiconductors to make it. You can keep harping about that, and that just reduces your own stature in eyes of the people.
Yeah. No, I mean, perfectly summed up, Nirav, right? And it's just more politics than economics. And by calling Rahul Gandhi young, I think Mr. Raghuram Rajan was kind of flattering himself also. Rahul Gandhi is 52 and Mr. Rajan is 59, right? So they're just about 7 years apart, right? So anyway, moving on to some positive news. The Hockey World Cup has been going on in full swing with exciting matches all around. After the win on the opening day of the tournament, India had a tie with England on 15th with both the teams at 0, but scored another win on 19th against Wales with a 4-2. The latest matches on 20th saw Germany win against Korea, Belgium against Japan, Australia against South Africa, and France tied Argentina. Abhishek, have you been following the matches?
Yeah, I have checked out the India England one. I was watching definitely. It was a very exciting nil-nil match which is a surprising, but that's how it was. Like both teams had a lot of chances, but the goalkeepers played well. There was some inefficient finishing and all that, but it was definitely a very exciting end-to-end match. So yeah, right now we are now entering the knockout stages of the competition. So India finished second in their group because England had a better goal difference, right? Although both of them finished on the same number of points. And so now the format of the tournament is a little different to how we've typically seen cricket or football tournaments. So what happens is there are these four groups, and the a top team in each group automatically qualifies into the quarterfinals. The second and the third teams of each of the groups now has a sort of runoff, or they call it, let's say, the second round crossover match, right? And so India has to play New Zealand, which finished third in one of the groups, right? So once we win that crossover game, and I think India is definitely the favorites to defeat New Zealand, then we enter the quarterfinals proper, and then there we will face the defending champions, Belgium, who topped their group. So yeah, I think that match would be very interesting to see if India can actually advance into the semi-finals. So India last won the World Cup and their only time they won the World Cup was in 1975. And since then, India has not even reached the semi-finals once, right? So reaching the semi-finals itself would be a very big thing for India, but it would be pretty challenging to defeat the defending champions, Belgium. I think Australia, the Netherlands, and Belgium are probably the three best teams in the tournament as of now. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if India can get past Belgium and make the semis.
Yeah, all right. All the best to the Indian team, and we'll certainly follow their journey. In more positive news, on Thursday, Prime Minister Modi inaugurated two new Mumbai metro lines, 7 and 2A, that is Dahisar to Andheri East, which is 18 kilometers, and Dahisar to DN Nagar, 18 kilometers as well. The Prime Minister travelled in the metro train between Gundavali and Mogra stations and interacted with a group of youngsters, women, and metro rail workers. Nirav, again, very positive news on the infrastructure front, right?
Yeah. So this is like the most positive infra news for me personally. So Gundavli station is like where near my parents live, right? So that's where I've grown up as well. That is like this is adding infrastructure to like a very congested area of Mumbai. It is in parallel with the current Western Railway suburban line as well. So it takes off some load from there. Mumbai just had one line one which was operating, which runs east west, and then there were six other lines in construction. So 2 and 7 have started. You'll have line 3 starting hopefully this time next year, half of it, and then 4, 5, and 6 are also under construction at various stages. So maybe they take 2 years. So this is like a huge addition to like a very crowded, cramped city, and probably I was joking with someone. One third of it takes away from the suburban railway. One third of its traffic is probably taking people away from roads to choose metro, and one third is people who are not making trips or not going actually going and using. So I think this is a very positive thing. This spending on infra in big cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi has already seen it, is the highest return on marginal spending, because this frees up time, frees up money, effort, energy for the most productive area of your economy, right? And then this can has a huge multiplier effect. So I'm very very happy about it. Mumbai has like a lot of infrastructure projects in the pipeline, which hopefully come over the next 5 years. They were stuck for a couple of years due to COVID, also due to bickering between the whole MVA government, etc. Now with the Shiv Sena government with BJP, Eknath Shinde is like again there's a renewed focus on infrastructure, right? So hopefully all these things pick up and we have like more and more of such updates from all over the country. Every week in Bharatvaarta, we should talk about like one new infra update, one new inauguration.
Yeah, for sure. I think in the initial days, at least, we used to cover infra a lot, right? And somehow, I mean, that focus got a little diluted, I would say. But yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we should also perhaps do a special episode on infra in the country itself. I remember the last episode we did was the Indian Bridge Management System, right, which came out a while back. But yeah, very good point, Nirav. And on that note, we come to the end of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us up until now. If you liked the content, don't forget to rate and review us. It'll help more people discover this content. Also, share it with your friends and family as well. We have a couple of very good episodes coming up this week. We have a conversation with Shashank Mattu, who writes for the Live Mint on geopolitics and so on. He also writes fabulous threads on Twitter, very simplified understanding of geopolitics, India's role in the world order, and so on. So catch that conversation. He has spoken to Sharan Shetty, and also we have a special Republic Day episode with Shubhendu and Sarthak, two young lawyers who talk about the Constitution, its founding, the significance, and the relevance in today's age, right? Again, there's been a lot of back and forth on the judiciary and the executive. We covered a bunch of views on that as well. So two fantastic episodes coming up. I hope you like them, and if you do, don't forget to share them with your friends and family. Thank you again for joining us. So from Abhishek, Nirav, and myself, we'll see you soon on another episode of the Weekly. Stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.